Story 1. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I am, at a major Chamber of Commerce function, about to receive an award, and Rhonda, my wife of 10 years, just whispered in my ear that she was going to leave with Gerald, my business partner, for a weekend in Las Vegas, immediately after the award ceremony. Are you out of your mind? I asked quietly so as not to be heard by anyone else. Only with lust, she whispered back. For him right now. I'm feeling his hardness through his trousers, and soon I'll be putting it inside me. We need to talk, I told her. But not now, later, after we get home from the ceremony. No, Ron. I'm telling you how it's going to be, she said. If you want to talk, you can give me some ideas, or maybe remind me of the things you've always wanted me to do with you but refused. I'll be home Monday evening, and we can talk then if you still feel the need. This was the start of a 3-day weekend, and I knew she didn't have to be back to work until Tuesday. And you plotted this with him? I asked quietly. Of course, she said. His wife also knows. I looked and saw my soon-to-be ex-partner and friend sitting next to Rhonda with a smug grin on his face. I wanted to punch him, but not here, not in front of all these people, these so-called pillars of the community. I looked at Judy, his wife, who sat next to him. She didn't look too happy at all. Apparently, she also knew about this. My mind was racing, but I focused back on the present when I heard my name called by the master of ceremonies. I got up, shook his hand, and accepted the award, holding it for a second as a photographer took a picture. I gave my prepared acceptance speech and noticed, as I did, that Rhonda's hand was in Gerald's lap. I decided to make an impromptu change to my speech. On my notes, I had included an acknowledgement of my wife, but I ended my speech a bit early, not even mentioning her name. Instead, I thanked the community for their support and the chamber for the award, then ended my speech. I didn't know if anyone would notice the slight, but Rhonda mentioned it after I sat back down. What? Didn't I even rate a mention? She asked sarcastically, as I took a sip of my now tepid drink. I simply glared at her, not saying a word. So that's how it's going to be, huh? Well, like I said, we'll talk Monday evening when I get back. Gerald got up and headed for the podium, deliberately bumping into me on his way up. If you go through with this, don't bother coming back, I whispered to Rhonda as Gerald spoke. There will be nothing here for you to come back to. To emphasize the point, I slipped my ring off my finger and handed it to her. She smirked as she dropped it in her purse. You know why I'm doing this? She asked. Of course you do, she added. It's for what you did with Judy. Don't lie, I know all about it. I have pictures. So, you'll say or do nothing. Let me do this, and we'll talk when I get back. Don't do this, Rhonda, I said. Nothing happened between Judy and me except dinner. We can talk about it after the ceremony. Too late, she said. It's going to happen. The tickets have already been bought. The reservations have already been made. I'm going to give Gerald my body this weekend. I'm going to let him do whatever he wants. And there's nothing you can say or do to stop me. What if I told you he's HIV positive? I asked. She laughed. I wouldn't believe you. You'd say or do just about anything to keep me from going, she said. Don't say I didn't warn you, I told her. I guarantee that if you do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Look, just enjoy the weekend without me. Go play golf or something. When I get back, things will go on as before, she said. I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. No, they won't, Rhonda, I told her. We'll see about that, she said. A minute or two later, Gerald returned and took his seat. Rhonda turned to him, and I could see she had placed her hand back in his lap. Disgusted, I turned away from her. Finally, the event was over and we got up to leave. This is your last chance, Rhonda, I said. She and Gerald smirked as they looked at me. We're leaving now, Ron, she said. I may call you or not. Either way, I'll see you Monday. No hard feelings, partner, Gerald said. I promise not to damage her too badly for you. We're done, Gerald, I told him calmly. As partners and friends. I don't ever want to see or hear from you again. We'll see about that, partner, he said as he guided Rhonda away. I turned and looked at Judy, who had tears falling down her face. "Do you need a ride home?" I asked her. She shook her head. "No, I have an Uber coming for me," she said. "Thanks for asking anyway. Didn't you tell them that nothing happened between us?" I asked. "That it was just a dinner and a conversation?" "I tried, but they wouldn't listen," she said. "Gerald has pictures of us at the restaurant, and Rhonda insists it was a prelude to an affair. You know how she can get sometimes." Yeah, I knew all right. Until now, the only complaint I had about Rhonda was her uncanny ability to act on false assumptions. And once she got something in her head, there was almost nothing anyone could do to change her mind. "I see," I told her. "I'm sorry, Ron," she said. "You don't deserve this. I only hope he thought enough to bring protection." "It doesn't matter," I said. "Whether he uses protection or not is immaterial. The fact that she's going to let him be with her is all that matters." "No, I'm finished with both of them." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What I need to," I told her. "What about you?" "I told Gerald if he went through with this, I'd divorce him," she said. "And that's exactly what I intend to do. This isn't the first time he's cheated on me, but by God, it'll be the last." "Good for you," I said. "Let me know if there's anything I can do. If you like, I can refer you to a good lawyer." "Thanks, Ron," she said. "I appreciate that." With that she left and I followed shortly, making my way back to the car. On the way home, I thought about the last 10 years with Rhonda. We married about 5 years after Gerald and I went into business together. Gerald introduced me to her after we had been in business for about 4 years. By then, he and Judy had been married for 3 years. Rhonda and I dated, fell in love, and got married. Gerald was the best man at our wedding, and I never would have believed he would be capable of doing something like this. I never thought Rhonda would either. By the time we got married, the business was growing significantly, so my lawyer suggested I have her sign a prenuptial agreement to protect my assets, which included my home and the business. She didn't like it, but she signed it anyway. I made sure the agreement was equitable and included a clause for infidelity. I had a lot to do and not a whole lot of time to get it done. It was still fairly early in the evening when I got home, so I called my lawyer, Jim Simpson, on his cell. "Hey Ron," he said. "I thought you and Rhonda would be celebrating your award tonight. What's going on?" He listened as I told him what happened earlier in the evening. "Oh my God, Ron, I'm so sorry to hear that," he said when I finished. "You want me to start drawing up papers?" "Yes, Jim," I said. "I want a divorce for adultery based on our prenuptial, and I want you to draw up papers dissolving the partnership." When Gerald and I drew up the partnership, we included a clause that said the partnership could be dissolved if one or more of the partners engaged in morally unacceptable behavior that could significantly impact the operation of the business. I felt this certainly fell into that category. "Are you sure about that?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely. I want it reorganized as a sole proprietorship if possible. I know we had talked about incorporating it as a limited liability company before. Maybe this is the time to do that." "All right, I'll get the ball rolling on that," Jim said. "It's going to take some time, though." "I know," I said. "But I want the partnership dissolved as fast as possible, and I want my losses mitigated as much as possible." "Consider it done, my friend," he said. "Thanks," I said, ending the call. I knew that, under the terms of the agreement, I would have to pay Gerald something to get him out of the company, so the less I had to give him, the better. I knew Jim would come through for me. A couple of hours later, I got a call from Rhonda. "I just wanted to let you know we're at the hotel in Vegas," she said. "And I'm so ready for a weekend of fun. Rhonda, you should know before you do this that Gerald is HIV positive," I said. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Stop this nonsense and come home right now. If you do, then maybe, and I do mean maybe, we can fix our marriage." "Oh, Ron," she said with a laugh. "Are you still on that? Get over yourself. This is going to happen. I'm going to let Gerald enjoy my body all weekend long." "Rhonda, I'm warning you," I began to say, but she had already ended the call. That was it. I had warned her, but she refused to listen. The rest of my now screwed-up weekend was spent exorcising Rhonda from my life. On Jim's advice, I went to the bank on Saturday morning and took care of things there, paying off her credit card before canceling it. I got 3 voicemails from Rhonda and a few text messages over the weekend. She was doing her best to get me riled up. "Oh yeah," she moaned in one of her voicemails. "Gerald is buried deep in me right now, Ron. It's so much bigger than yours and feels so much better." The other voicemails were similar. I forwarded all of them to Jim so he could have them as proof of Rhonda's adultery. I also forwarded them to Judy so she could use them in her divorce from Gerald. I called a locksmith and had all of the locks changed on the doors. I wasn't worried about keeping the house, as I had bought it before we got married and the mortgage was in my name only. I tossed all of her clothes and prized possessions into trash bags and crammed them into her car, leaving enough room for her to drive. I pulled the car out of the garage and left it in the driveway. I pulled down all of the photos that included Rhonda. I broke up the large wedding portrait that hung over the fireplace before placing the broken pieces inside to be burned. By the time I was finished, there was no evidence that she had ever been in the place. After listening to her voicemails the next morning, I called her mother and said we need to talk. She invited me over for lunch, so I went. After eating a sandwich, she asked me what was going on, so I told her everything. I even played the voicemails Rhonda had left. By the time I finished, she was inconsolable. "That stupid girl," she said. "I can't believe she would do something like this to you. I'm so sorry, Ron. Of course, she can stay here until she gets back on her feet, but I'm going to tan her hide for this." "I'm sorry as well, Mom," I told her. I always thought of Rhonda's mother as Mom, especially since my own mother died from a stroke a few years before. "She's going to need all the help and support you can give her." "Of course," she said, "but I'm still going to put her over my knee." I chuckled and gave her a hug. "Please stay in touch, Ron," she said as we broke the hug. I promised I would and left. She was still wiping tears from her face when I left. From there, I went to a tavern that served the juiciest burgers and enjoyed one with a couple of beers. Jim called me on Monday to say he had the paperwork drawn up, so I went to his office. Everything looked good, so I paid his retainer and left. The papers would be filed with the court the next day, which was Tuesday. "Where would you like her served?" Jim asked. "Preferably at her place of work," I said. "She humiliated me in public, so I think it's only fair I return the favor." "Okay," he said. Before I left, I got a couple more voicemails from Rhonda that day, the last one letting me know she was on her way home. I got a good laugh at that. Gerald dropped her off that evening at about 5:30, then took off. Apparently, he was a bit too cowardly to face me after what he had done. I waited and heard her come onto the porch. I heard her trying her keys, but none of them worked. Finally, she rang the doorbell. I ignored it for a few minutes, and she began pounding on the door. "Let me in, damn it," she yelled. I got up and walked to the door. I opened it and stepped outside. She looked at me before trying to walk inside, but I stopped her. "What are you doing? I live here too." "No, you don't," I told her. "Not anymore. You gave up that right when you left Friday night. But I told you I would be back, and we could discuss things if you still wanted to," she said. "And why is my car in the driveway? Why isn't it in the garage? And what's all that stuff in it?" "That's all your stuff, Rhonda," I said. "Like I said, you don't live here anymore." "Look, I know you're upset," she said. "We can talk about it if you want. I wanted to talk with you on Friday, but you weren't interested, remember?" I asked. "I practically begged you to listen to me, but you flat out refused and insisted on spending the weekend with Gerald." "That's right," she said. "Since you were with his wife, I figured I deserved to get some revenge." "And what proof do you have that I was with Judy?" I asked. "Show me." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of Judy and me at a table in a restaurant. "What's that?" she asked. "That's 2 people talking over dinner," I said. "There's no intimacy in that picture, and nothing happened between Judy and me. For that matter, I have never been with another woman since you and I became exclusive." "Then why were you having dinner with her?" Rhonda asked. "Surely you expected something afterward." There you go again, making false assumptions, I said. What are you talking about? She asked. That's what I wanted to talk to you about on Friday, but you refused to listen to me, I said. Tell me, did Gerald ever use protection this weekend? Of course not, she said. You know I hate it. I see, I said. And I guess you let him finish inside you multiple times? That's right, she said. I still have some of him inside me right now. I was going to let you clean it out of me, and if you were repentant, I was going to let you have intimacy with me, but I don't think that's going to happen. So you were planning to kill me then? I said. Her eyes grew wide. Of course not, she said. Where did you get that silly idea from? Do you remember a few months back when he said he wasn't feeling too well? I asked. That was just a few weeks after he returned from a trip back east. Yeah, I remember, she said. I suggested he go see his doctor and get checked out. He never told me what the doctor said, but Judy learned he tested positive for HIV. You want to know how she learned about it? I'll tell you. She learned about it because he infected her. She tested positive just recently. That's what we were talking about at dinner that night. At the time he infected her, he didn't know he had it. But he sure as hell knew this last weekend when he was with you. I handed her a copy of Gerald's test results Judy had given me the night we had dinner. Rhonda's face turned white, and her eyes widened. I even told you on Friday, but you refused to listen. Oh my God, you were telling the truth. I'm going to get sick. She doubled over and vomited in the front yard. I stood and watched as she retched several times. When she finished, she looked at me, scared. I'm going to die, aren't I? She asked. I shrugged my shoulders. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. Judy said her doctor told her it's not the death sentence, it was a few years ago. But it's still pretty rough. At any rate, I suggest you go see Dr. Barnes first thing in the morning and let him know. Have him run some tests on you. Maybe, if he can catch it early enough, he can do something. But I do know that our marriage is dead. Where will I go? She asked, tears falling down her face. Your mother said you can stay with her until you get on your feet, I said. My mother? You told my mother? She asked, shocked. Yes. She deserves to know the truth, don't you think? I guess, she said. And you'll be served with divorce papers at work sometime this week, I told her. Please no, I don't want a divorce. Can't we work through this? No. We probably could have if you had talked to me on Friday instead of leaving me to spend the weekend with him in Vegas. But you just had to have things your way. You made your bed, Rhonda. Now you get to lie in it. So what were you doing with Judy in that restaurant? She asked. I already told you. Talking. I said. She got her test results and wanted to talk to me. She asked if I had any idea he was positive. Of course, I told her the truth. I didn't. I was trying to find a way to help the two of them get through this. But it seems Gerald decided to have her followed. He got those pictures of us in the restaurant. Naturally, when you saw them, you made your usual false assumptions, and here we are. I hope it was all worth it to you. Please, can't you just give me one more chance? She begged. I'm dying here. I've been dying since you walked out on me Friday night. But I love you, she cried. Yeah, right, I thought. Don't you have any love for me at all? She pleaded. Love you? Right now, I don't even like you. Now get off my lawn. I walked back inside and slammed the door, locking it behind me. I looked through the window and saw her sobbing as she knelt on the lawn. She looked totally defeated and forlorn, but right then, I didn't care. Eventually, she turned and slowly ambled to her car, still crying. As I watched, she backed out of the driveway and drove off, still crying. The next day, I got to the office early, hoping to catch Gerald when he came in. I had already advised security to confiscate his badge when he arrived and had a couple of security officers waiting by his office. When he arrived, he gave me a smirk but lost it when he saw the officers. What's this all about? He asked. They're here to confiscate your badge and make sure you don't take any company property when you leave, I told him. Leave? I'm not going anywhere. Wrong answer, I told him. As of today, the partnership is dissolved. You no longer work here. Bull. You can't do that. Read the agreement we both signed, I said, tossing a copy of it on his desk. I highlighted the appropriate clause. The dissolution of the partnership is being filed this morning, and the company is temporarily being reorganized as a sole proprietorship. I'll give you 15 minutes to pack your things and get off the property before I have you escorted out. Is this all because I was with your wife over the weekend? He asked. Partly. It's also for deliberately exposing her to HIV, which I've been told is a crime in this state. What? He asked. I saw your test results. Judy showed them to me. That's what we were discussing that day in the restaurant. She told me you infected her as well. I was planning to make you a silent partner so you could keep your medical coverage and still earn an income, but what you did this weekend was beyond the pale. You know you're infected, but you still chose to spend the weekend with Rhonda without informing her. That's illegal in this state. The two of you had this all planned out, except she didn't know you're HIV positive. In my view, what you did violates the terms of our partnership agreement. I had considered giving you a severance package, but in light of your actions, I've changed my mind. Now, get out. You can't do this, he exclaimed. I'll fight you on this. So help me God. I'll start spreading rumors that you've been threatening half the female staff here with their jobs if they don't go along with what you want. Really? I asked. You'd deliberately slander me in the community for revenge on top of deliberately infecting my wife with HIV so she could infect me? You're damn right. By the time I'm done, you won't have any business at all. I smiled and pulled an audio recorder from my pocket. I hit a button and played our conversation back to him. I think that should add a few million to the lawsuit and help secure a conviction. Not to mention the fact that you made your claim in front of at least 2 witnesses, right? I asked, looking at the 2 security guards, who smiled and nodded their heads. I looked at my watch. You know, I used to think you were my best friend. I also used to think you were quite intelligent. I see now that my initial assessment of you was wrong. You have 10 minutes to pack up and get the hell off my property. I looked at the guards before speaking again. Keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't touch his computer and only takes what's his. Yes, sir, Mr. Hastings, one of the guards said. Gerald packed his stuff as the security guards watched. On his way out, he stopped by my office. I'm sorry, Ron, he said. Just go. Get out. After Gerald left, I called a meeting of all employees. It was crowded in the main office, but I felt they deserved to know there would be changes. I told them that Gerald was no longer with the company and the partnership had been dissolved. I assured them that this change wouldn't affect their jobs in the long run but could cause some short-term disruption. One of the employees asked why Gerald left, but all I would say was that it was a personal matter. The next several weeks were a blur. Rhonda was served with divorce papers at her place of work on Thursday, which prompted a great deal of gossip. Her mother told me she had gone to see the doctor on Tuesday, but it would be a while before she got the results of her tests. Thankfully, Rhonda didn't deluge me with calls or texts. It seems she finally realized that she had made a huge mistake, one that would affect her for the rest of her life. Realizing there would be no reconciliation, she signed the papers. Jim told me the divorce would be final in 90 days. Judy filed for divorce against Gerald on the grounds of adultery. She told me he was living in a motel room that was rented by the week until he could find something else. But he had another problem. After Rhonda's visit, Dr. Barnes reported Gerald to the authorities. From what I learned, the state we live in requires those infected with HIV to inform their partners before any intimate activity takes place. Since Rhonda said Gerald never informed her, he could receive up to 20 years in prison. I also learned that this was one of those laws many prosecutors didn't like to enforce since there was too great a chance of backlash. But the local authorities decided to go after Gerald based on Rhonda's testimony. A week or so after being kicked out of his house, police showed up at the motel where he was staying and took him into custody, concerned that he could present a danger to the general population. He was placed in solitary confinement. Gerald's trial became something of a circus. The prosecuting attorney painted him as a cruel, manipulative man who deliberately set out to infect me, his partner, with the disease by first infecting Rhonda. Rhonda testified, as did I. Judy also testified. The prosecutor played the audio I captured in my office, putting Gerald in an even worse position. It didn't take long for the jury to convict him. Disgusted by what he heard, the judge sentenced him to the maximum allowable by law, 20 years in the state penitentiary. But Gerald's problems were far from over. Now he was in the middle of a divorce as well as civil litigation. After Judy's divorce was finalized, she sold her home and moved out of the area. Rhonda contacted me a few days before our divorce was final and asked if I would have dinner with her. After thinking about it, I agreed. I felt it was time for closure. We met at a quiet restaurant where we enjoyed a final meal. "I hope you're not too scared or ashamed to be seen with me," she said. "We're not going to be swapping any bodily fluids, so it shouldn't be a problem," I told her half-jokingly. "I got the results of my test. I'm positive. I'm not surprised, but I am sorry to hear that," I told her. "It's not your fault. You tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. It's a mistake I'll be paying for the rest of my life." "So, what is the doctor doing?" I asked. "He's got me on antiretroviral therapy. It'll never be cured, but he tells me I can live a fairly normal life if I take the drug every day." Of course, I had to let my boss know. He's letting me telecommute so I can work from home, and Mom says I can stay with her as long as I need to. "That's good to hear," I said. "My lawyer is also filing a lawsuit against Gerald. I've been told it's pretty much a slam dunk with his conviction, but collecting may be an issue with him being in prison and all." "I see," I told her. "Well, I happen to know that his 401k was pretty substantial, even after subtracting Judy's portion. She also sold their house, so maybe you can get his half of that." "Have you spoken with her recently?" "I have. She's out of the area, but we still talk from time to time. I'll mention that to her and see what she says." "What happened to you, Rhonda?" I asked after a while. "I don't get it. I wanted to have kids with you, spend the rest of my life with you." "I don't know," she said quietly. "When Gerald showed me those pictures of you with Judy, I lost it. I just knew you were having an affair with her. I really jumped the shark on that, didn't I?" "Just a bit. But why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked. "I was angry. I didn't want to hear anything you had to say. Judy tried to warn me as well, but I figured she was in cahoots with you and would say anything to stop me. I even told you that Friday about Gerald," I said. "Twice. I hoped you would have gotten the hint. Frankly, I didn't want to hear anything you had to say," she told me. "And now I'm paying the price. I'll be paying it for the rest of my life. Can you ever forgive me for being so stupid?" "I don't know. Right now, it's all I can do to be civil around you." "I thank you for that at least," she said. "I know it's probably not easy for you. So how are you holding up?" "I manage. I stay pretty busy with the business now that Gerald is gone. My workload has doubled, so there's no shortage of things to do." "Any women in your life?" she asked. "No. I'm not in the market for a relationship. Probably won't be for quite a while. Once bitten, twice shy, you know?" "I'm sorry," she said. "I've learned a thing or two myself from all of this." "What's that?" she asked. "Never trust anyone," I said. She looked at me, shocked. "I knew Gerald for years before I met you. That is, I thought I knew him. I had no idea he was capable of doing what he did. And the things I learned about him during their divorce frankly make me sick to my stomach. What you did certainly didn't help." "I'm sorry," she said. "Yeah, well, it is what it is," I said. "I see you're still wearing your rings," I added, looking at her left hand. "We're still technically married," she said. "At least for a few more days. If you want them back, you can have them, but I was hoping you'd let me keep them." "I don't want them. I just take them down and sell them anyway." "Why would you want them?" "As a reminder," she said, "of what I once had and threw away." "They're yours," I said. "Do with them what you want." "Thank you," she said quietly, a tear falling down her cheek. "I'd better get going now," I said. "I have a lot to do yet tonight." "Tell your mother I said hello, and good luck." "I will," she said. "And thanks, Ron. I really am sorry about all this." "Yeah, me too, Rhonda. Goodbye." I could hear her sobbing as I left. I wasn't as angry as I was when this all first went down, but I still felt sad. It's not easy ending a decade-long relationship with someone you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with. Work went on as normal, and within a year, things had settled down to a steady roar. I had plenty of opportunities but chose not to date or pursue a relationship. I still had some serious trust issues after what Rhonda and Gerald had done to me. Life consisted of working, eating, and sleeping. I had no social life whatsoever. A year and a half after my divorce, Denise, my secretary, introduced me to her younger sister, Angela, at a company event. She was a couple of years younger than me and had just gotten through a divorce from her husband, who left her for another woman. We began dating, taking things one step at a time. Slowly, both of us had been burned by our previous spouses and still had some trust issues. But as we spent more time together, our trust in each other grew. We dated several times over the course of a month before we ended up spending the night together in my bed. A few months later, I popped the question and she said yes. Our wedding is set for the spring, to be followed up with a 5-day Caribbean cruise. We extended an invitation to Rhonda's mother, but we don't know if she plans to attend. I'm still hurting from what Rhonda and Gerald did, but Angela has done a superb job of healing the scars. I've done my best to help her heal as well, and I'm certainly looking forward to spending the rest of my life with her. Thinking about Angela, I'm often reminded of the old saying, sometimes the bad things that happen in our lives put us directly on the path to the best things that will ever happen to us. Story 2. I knew things were going to be different as soon as I started my new school. I was born and raised in Philly, and moving an hour away from the city would definitely take some adjustment. Adjustment meant I had to learn to live with it. I kept my nose clean and stayed out of trouble at my father's request and my mother's insistence. The population was diversified, to say the least. Some black people, some Hispanics, a few Italians, and some Jewish folks. The majority were hard-headed Dutch. They weren't Amish or Mennonites, just German Lutherans who dominated the area and everything in it. It was a melting pot, so I had no real trouble blending in, but I missed my Philly friends. I stayed in the area after graduation, mainly to be close to my family. I still made regular trips to the old neighborhood and stayed close to my old friends. I got my first job driving a fuel oil delivery truck. In a few years, I was working inside, dispatching and taking orders. I had a knack for the business and could actually see myself as an owner of a similar operation in a few years. I had no trouble finding friends of the opposite gender, and my social life was better than expected. When I got married, my mother was a little disappointed that my new wife wasn't Italian, but she did her best to make sure Marcy was accepted without reservations. After 2 kids, Marcy insisted I get a vasectomy. I had no problem with that, but once the kids started school, Marcy wanted to go to work. My father never felt it was a good idea for a wife and mother to work. I'm not completely sure of the rationale behind this, but looking back, it made sense. It wasn't that I minded Marcy working, but I disliked the fact that she was socializing with people she knew and grew up with. I liked some of her friends, but not all of them. In school, she had been involved in all sorts of student activities and enjoyed them. I avoided such things and the people who participated. I always felt they were a bunch of snobs sitting around, stroking each other's egos. I knew she had been active before we met, and I was too. We never discussed what we did before we were together. It wasn't a rule, just something we fell into. We were married for about 10 years when things started to fall apart. Marcy had been working in the claims department of a local national insurance company. I got concerned when she started working overtime and weekends. 6 months later, I knew I had to end it when the seminar came up. Tony, I don't understand the problem. It's only for 3 days. I already talked to your mom, and she agreed to stay with the kids while I'm gone. You'll be home in the evenings. I know you can cook for yourself. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to ask. Who's going on this seminar? She perked up a little when I responded. 6 girls from the department, Betty Klink from personnel, and Rodney. I smiled when she said his name. I was amazed she hadn't figured out that I knew all about her special lunches and late-night work sessions with her boss, Rodney Foote. Rodney and Marcy grew up together. He was one of those kids who joined every club in school but never participated in sports. Do you take me for a fool, Marcy? I don't understand. What are you talking about? I've known about you and Rodney for 6 months now. If you think I'm going to let you go away with him for 3 days, you're out of your mind. Tony, what are you talking about? Rodney is my boss. There's nothing going on between us. I would never think of cheating on you. You know that. I looked at the empty beer can in my hand and slowly got out of my chair. As I walked to the kitchen, I crushed the aluminum can and threw it at the trash. I missed but didn't bother picking it up. The new can made a hissing noise as I popped the top and sat back down. Marcy just sat, waiting for me to respond. You're the mother of my children, and as a mother, you do a great job. The only reason I haven't thrown you out is because of that. I talked to my mom, and she said I should stay firm for the kids' sake. If I divorce you, the courts will give you my kids. I can't let that happen. You told your mother I was cheating on you? No, someone from church told her. I didn't deny it when she confronted me. You're not serious. I don't believe you. Why are you saying all this? I took a swig of beer and smiled. Rodney lives at 321 David Drive, 3 blocks from your office. You and your boss go there about 3 times a week and stay for 3 hours each time. What do you do at his apartment for 3 hours? After you explain that, tell me about all the overtime you've been putting in at the office. Did you know your office cleaning lady goes to church with my mother? Her eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip trembled. As long as you don't publicly embarrass me or my family, I won't do anything. If that changes, all bets are off. You can leave or stay, but you won't take my boys from me. She jumped to her feet, clearly upset. Damn you, Tony. I hate you. You jerk. That was the first time she'd ever insulted me and the first time she made a derogatory remark about my heritage. The Dutch in her finally came out. We had 2 boys, Terry and Rick, who shared a room with bunk beds. The 3rd bedroom became my room. It was a rented house. We had over $60,000 saved for a down payment on our dream home, but my dream had turned into a nightmare. Nothing more was said about the seminar. Marcy no longer worked overtime. She packed her lunch every day. The atmosphere at home wasn't chilly. It was freezing. Mom had no new feedback from her church friends. Things seemed normalizing, but I still felt uncomfortable. There was no intimacy between us, and I knew I wouldn't tolerate that for long. Against my better judgment, I agreed to accompany Marcy to her company Christmas party. I didn't want her to go alone, and I thought I could quietly pass the evening by staying out of the way. It was a good plan but full of flaws. The company rented a hall with a dance floor, buffet table, and open bars. By the time we got there, the only tables left were near the company big shots. It was obvious all the employees were avoiding those seats. Things seemed all right for the first hour. I noticed Rodney across the room, hanging out with some friends. Several of Marcy's coworkers asked her to dance, and I was fine with it since I didn't want to. I was on my 3rd beer when I noticed Marcy and Rodney exchanging glances, nods and head tilts, but something was definitely going on. I tried my best to act bored and disinterested, but I kept an eye on them. My wife excused herself to use the ladies' room. I scanned the room and noticed Rodney was gone. It was unbelievable. After our discussion, it was stupid for her to try to meet with Rodney while I was in the same building. She could see him at work without the risk of being interrupted. The only reason for doing this was to make me look like a fool in front of everyone. Her coworkers would see me as a weak man, easily deceived by his wife. As Marcy entered the hallway, she glanced back to make sure I was still in my seat. Then she disappeared. I excused myself from the table and headed for the restrooms. I noticed Rodney's buddies weren't smiling anymore. I checked the ladies' room first, but it was empty. I had better luck in the men's room. They were kissing, his back to me, and his hand was under her skirt. There was no resistance on her part. I grabbed Rodney by the neck and slammed his head into the bathroom tile. Something definitely broke. I heard Marcy shouting my name, but I ignored it. I spun Rodney around, and blood from his broken nose splattered on my shirt. He was limp but still standing, so I punched him in the stomach. He went down and started vomiting. Marcy pulled on my jacket, but I didn't react. Things were quiet in the main hall as I dragged Rodney to the middle of the floor by his necktie. The band stopped playing, and everyone watched as I dropped him. I looked around the room to see if anyone wanted to help him, but there were no takers. I'm sorry for ruining your party. I'll be going now, but I'm leaving my wife here for your entertainment. Drop her off at the house when you're done with her. Rodney was trying to get up, his face a bloody mess. Marcy stood in the doorway, her mouth hanging open. It was hard to tell if she was upset with what I had done to her lover or with what I had just said to her coworkers. I didn't care. Rodney was directly under the mistletoe, and I couldn't help myself. Before leaving, I kicked him and he collapsed. No one ever said a word. I called my mom from the car and asked her to come by the house to pick up the boys. Going out of town for a few days seemed like a good idea, and I didn't want to leave the kids with their mother. I was sure she would be in no condition to properly care for them. I was making plans as I drove, having no idea what I was going to do or where I was going to go. My boss had no objection to giving me a week or so off. Mom and Dad were already there when I arrived. After paying the babysitter, I helped get the boys ready. My one bag consisted mostly of socks and underwear, but I threw in a few shirts and pants, just in case. Before leaving, I got the cash box out of the basement rafters. The banks were paying less than 1% interest on savings accounts, so I decided to keep the money at home. I know it's foolish to keep $62,000 in the house, but I guess it's something I inherited from my mom. She used to keep big stashes all around her kitchen. I was turning out all the lights when a cab pulled up and dropped Marcy off. She walked in and sat on the couch without saying a word. She looked more worried than mad, more upset than scared. I told you there was only one rule. Do not humiliate me or my family in public. You just couldn't resist doing it? Could you? I waited for a moment as she started crying, then walked out the door. It was just a little past 9 as I hit the Schuylkill Expressway. That party didn't last long, at least not for me. I decided I'd spend a few days in Atlantic City before going back home. But first I had to see my old friend Sal. Sal had a sandwich shop in the old neighborhood. It wasn't like the flashy ones you see in Philly travel films, but more of a convenience for the people who lived close by. His primary income came from other endeavors most of us either ignored or participated in. He lived on the second floor and worked out of the back room. It was like an old home week. After I explained my situation, he agreed to help me. Tony, it's going to cost you $20. Can you handle that? Or do you need me to spot you? I got it up front, no problem, I replied. Do you want it messy or quiet? Transparent? No fuss, no muss, nothing. I just need to leave for a few days. Got anything set up? No, I was thinking of going to Atlantic City, I said. How about 6 days and 7 nights at the Taj? What are you talking about, Sal? I got some comps coming. I think it would work out pretty well for you. Sounds good to me. Are you going alone, Tony? Yeah, this is all spur of the moment. I didn't have time to invite guests. You shouldn't be alone. You need someone to verify you were there. Hold on. Sal picked up the phone and dialed a number that must have been familiar. Carla, it's Sal. Make yourself pretty and get down here. No, nothing like that. You're going on vacation. He snickered as he hung up. Tony, remember Carla? My brother Michael's oldest. Yeah. Chubby little thing with dark brown eyes. I remember she was always laughing. How old is she now? Sal smiled at my recollection of his niece. She's 23 now, Tony, and she's not chubby anymore. Suddenly, I realized Carla would be accompanying me to the shore. I felt uncomfortable since she was Sal's niece, but hey, he was the one setting it up. Tony, you got a credit card? I got 2. I was going to cancel them Monday morning. No, don't do that. Use those cards as much as you can. Meals out, room service, even casino cash advances. But don't go overboard. You need the card action to prove you were there. Spread it out time-wise so it doesn't look like you snuck back home. It might cost you a couple grand, but it's cheap insurance. Sal knew his business. It all made sense. As I mulled it over, Carla came in. Tony, I haven't seen you since you moved up to the sticks. You look good. Now I knew why Sal was smiling. Carla was absolutely gorgeous. Those dark eyes were amazing, and the baby fat she used to have had moved to her chest. I knocked over my chair like a klutz as I jumped to my feet. Tony needs somebody to keep him company in Atlantic City for a few days. Are you up for it? Her mood changed slightly when he said that. "Aren't you still married?" she asked me. Before I could answer, Sal jumped in. "The marriage is dead, Carla. Tony needs a nurse right now. I knew you always liked him, so I thought of you first." "Sal, I'm not going to break up anyone's family. It's not fair for you to ask me. Besides, I'm not one of your girls. Why not send one of them? I don't expect you to sleep with him. Just keep him company and help him forget his troubles." Carla looked puzzled, as if she just figured something out. She was quick as well as beautiful. "I'll be glad to go with you, Tony, but you have to promise to buy me some saltwater taffy." We were all smiling now. "I'll need about an hour to get ready. Don't let him drink anything, Sal. I don't want to drive down there with a drunk." I thought I saw her wink as she left. Sal and I recapped our discussion while Carla was gone. He graciously accepted my $20,000 and promised complete satisfaction. The drive to Atlantic City was uneventful except that I had to give Carla a full rundown of the problems I was having with Marcy. Her only comment was, "Oh, the poor kids." Carla frowned when she saw the double beds, but luckily didn't notice me snickering. I was sure we'd only need one bed before the week was up. All good things come in time. We did a little gambling but didn't go overboard. I knew that in the long run I'd lose. Carla was happy with the quarter slots, and I was just killing time. We spent more time eating and walking on the boardwalk than anything else. Of course, we saw every show in town. I was a perfect gentleman the first night, but Carla and I were tearing up the sheets by noon on the second day. My mother was right, I should have married an Italian girl. Felt natural, and I didn't feel as if I were cheating. We were getting ready for supper on the fourth day when we got visitors. Two men, not in suits but sports jackets. "Tony Randazzo? I'm Ray Fritz, and this is my partner, Rupert Marks. We're from the Berks County Special Crimes Task Force. Can we talk with you for a few minutes?" Carla walked out of the bathroom in her undergarments. She glanced at the two men, walked to the bed, and picked up her bathrobe. She seemed a little embarrassed but knew they might pay me a visit. "Do you want to give me an idea of what we'll be talking about?" I asked. "We'd like to talk about your relationship with Rodney Foote." I didn't have a relationship with Rodney Foote. My wife did. Fritz did most of the talking while Rupert stared at Carla. "We realized that, Mr. Randazzo. We understand you had words with him at the Continental Insurance Christmas party. Is he pressing charges?" "No, he's disappeared, and we were wondering if you could help us locate him." "Gentlemen, before we discuss this further, I'd like someone from the Atlantic City Police Department here, and I don't mean a patrol officer. If you can't arrange that, I want a lawyer from Reading." Carla, now dressed, was putting on her jacket. "Sorry, fellas, but we've got 6 o'clock reservations. The steaks at the safari are fabulous. I'll probably be home this Friday. Would you like me to talk with you then?" They seemed dumbfounded. "Why do you think something happened to him? Maybe he just left town for a while." "He was picked up by a cab leaving the Community General Hospital on Sunday morning, and no one has seen him since." I nodded. "Well, I've been here since Friday night. You can verify that with the hotel staff. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're going to have some steaks. Any more questions?" "Yes, but they'll wait until Friday. We expect to see you then." I gave them a simple nod and gently steered them towards the door. We all rode the elevator together, and nothing more was said. When we reached the lobby, they went to hotel security while Carla and I headed for the safari. Terry and Rick were all over me when I got home. The saltwater taffy helped. Marcy, on the other hand, was cold. It was clear she had no idea what was expected of her. After talking with the police, I spent the afternoon with the boys and planned to have a talk with Marcy that evening. The boys were in front of the TV for the night, so I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Marcy to finish cleaning up. She took longer than usual, but I didn't budge. Finally, she turned toward me and sat with her elbows on the formica top. "What did you do with Rodney?" she asked, not mad or demanding, but sincerely concerned. "I was in Atlantic City all week. I haven't seen Rodney since the party." "You hurt him." "I hope so," I replied. "He was in the hospital for 2 days. You broke his jaw and nose." "He deserved it." She seemed to run out of questions. What were you doing with him in the men's room? I asked. Silence. Why did he have his hand up your skirt? Still no answer. Marcy was wringing her hands, staring at the tabletop. Why aren't you at work? And why are the kids home on a school day? I had to quit. Couldn't go back there. I took the boys out of school because your mother said you might be home today. It was time for confrontation. I told you there was only one rule. You couldn't do anything that would humiliate me or my family. A simple rule. Why did you ruin everything by violating it? You both felt you had to rub it in. Why? Marcy seemed more nervous as the conversation went on. I slammed my fist on the table hard. Why? Answer me. I don't know. I don't know. It just happened. You were sitting in the corner like a lost puppy, and we thought we could take advantage. We had no idea you'd go crazy. You acted like a madman. I was scared to death. At least I got some emotion out of her. But none of it made sense. I wouldn't even try to analyze what she said. It was stupid to do that while I was there. They had weeks to get together before the party, and I never would have known. No, they chose that time and place to humiliate me. Her rambling wouldn't change that. Marcy, you have 3 choices. Stay here and be a proper mother to your children. Get a divorce and leave without the kids. Or just disappear. If you stay, we won't live as husband and wife, and I won't tolerate any more affairs with Rodney or anyone else. At the mention of Rodney's name, Marcy burst into tears. Before she could choose, she bolted from the room, bawling. I guess we'd finish the conversation tomorrow. Adjustments were made. I got a small apartment a few blocks from the house so the boys could visit anytime. Carla moved in with me. The police talked to me a few more times but then stopped. Rodney Foote was picked up by a cab outside the hospital and never seen again. His family offered a reward, but no one responded. I had dinner with Marcy and the boys every night and spent as much time with my sons as possible on weekends. It was clear to everyone that Marcy and I were no longer together as a couple, though we were still married. Marcy spent time with her parents and sister. I had no problem with that. She didn't appear to be seeing anyone else. She quit her job after the Christmas party and didn't seem interested in getting another. We never finished the conversation we started that first night I came home. She played the role of a good mother. The house was always clean, the boys well-fed, and they had clean clothes. I took care of the lawn and outside work. Marcy got $200 each week for household expenses and her personal needs. Whenever I asked if she needed more, she always refused. We no longer had credit cards. At Thanksgiving and Christmas, the boys and I spent time with my family. Carla usually joined us. Marcy spent the holidays with her family but had Christmas Eve with the boys. It was awkward when Terry or Rick wanted to talk about their mother and me. Neither of us discussed it with them. I appreciated that she didn't either, but what could she say? The farce continued for years. Of course, my explanation doesn't fully convey how things actually happened. There were complications and disagreements, but we prevailed. Things with Carla were fine at first, but over time, she started spending more time with her family in Philly and less with me. Couldn't blame her. I was indebted to her for making the breakup easier. But I couldn't divorce Marcy, and as long as the boys lived at home, I couldn't throw her out. Those were self-imposed limitations, but I stuck with them. I hated the situation but couldn't think of an alternative. The boys, however, did. Terry was 16 when things came to a head. A new kid at school, related to Marcy's former lover, provoked Terry about the situation. It was the first time anything had come up, and Terry wasn't prepared for it. Rodney's nephew ended up in the hospital, and I had to pick Terry up from school. He was expelled for 2 weeks and faced assault charges. Rick, who witnessed the incident, tried to help Terry and ended up losing 2 teeth, but he gained his brother's admiration. When I brought the boys home, Terry tore into Marcy for not talking to them about what happened years ago. Marcy didn't defend herself. She just listened as her oldest son vented. I left them and took Rick to the dentist. He wasn't too broken up about the teeth, but I wasn't thrilled with the dental bills coming up. When we returned, Marcy was gone. Her car was still there, but that was it. Terry said she grabbed her purse and left without a word or explanation. I took a week off to settle things. Marcy's parents and sister refused to talk to me. After a week, I still didn't know where she was or what her intentions were. Carla and I moved into the house. Sharing a bed was uncomfortable at first, but the boys accepted it far more easily than I expected. Everything connected to Marcy disappeared one day while I was at work. I had no idea what Carla did with it, and I didn't ask. Carla took over all the duties Marcy had handled. I gave her a few credit cards to make things easier. It was odd that I trusted Carla more than I ever trusted my wife. I sold Marcy's car and bought a new one for Carla. Family gatherings were less stressful with the new arrangement. Carla was happier, and my mother was elated. Terry and Rick had no more trouble at school, and Rodney's nephew never returned. Things were finally looking up, but I was still married. I waited 2 months before reporting Marcy as a missing person. Actually, I reported her as a runaway spouse so I could use the report when filing for divorce on grounds of abandonment. 2 months later, I submitted the papers. Marcy had to be gone a year before the divorce would be granted. I was planning ahead. Things normalized. Terry and Rick had no trouble talking to Carla. They never called her Mom, always Carla. But everything was fine. We were more like a family than we'd been in years. One day, my final divorce decree arrived. I was a free man. 2 weeks later, Carla and I drove to Elkton and tied the knot. We were a family again. Terry graduated and joined the Air Force. A year later, Rick went to meat cutting school in Toledo. Everything went so fast. Soon, Carla and I were alone. We never heard from Marcy. Mom and Dad moved to Ocala and made everyone promise to visit at least twice a year. Nothing held us in Reading, so Carla and I moved back to Philly. Rick got a job at a fancy butcher shop in Westchester after graduating. We saw him a few times a month, and he always brought something nice to surprise us. A year later, one of Carla's nieces got married, and we had to attend. An Italian wedding in Philly is a big deal. Lots of relatives and freeloaders looking for booze and free food. But there was plenty to go around. We were sitting with friends, enjoying the evening when I noticed Carla seemed nervous. She kept glancing across the dance floor. I saw nothing and forgot about it until she excused herself to the ladies' room. Something didn't feel right. I watched her walk toward the back of the hall, meet one of her old girlfriends, and chat. She didn't go to the restroom but instead walked over to one of Sal's personal assistants. Carla gestured toward the table her girlfriend had come from. There were 3 guys and 3 girls at the table. They looked like thugs trying to be something they weren't. The girls were overdressed and leaning on the flashy side. Carla returned with a pensive but confident look. "Tony, we have a small problem. I figured that from your trip around the room. Care to explain? You have to keep your cool. In a couple of minutes, one of the guys at Gina's table is going to come over and bait you." "What do you mean, bait me?" "He's going to insult me to make you mad. When you get up to fight him, they'll gang up and beat you." "What am I supposed to do? Let him get away with it? Play along until Bobby V and the boys get in position. You might have to handle one, but that'll be the worst of it." "Play along how?" "Let him insult me, then agree. If he calls me a tramp, ask how much he's willing to pay. Whatever you do, don't let him rile you." "What brought this on? What did I do to these guys?" "Look at Gina's table. Do you see the girl with short platinum hair?" "Yeah. Look closer. Holy cow, it's Marcy. What's she doing here?" "Marcy's boyfriend is somehow related to the bride. She's still mad at you and set him up to fight you. I guess she's looking for payback. While you and Sal's guys take care of things, Gina and I will be talking to Marcy in the ladies' room. It won't be pretty." I didn't like how things were going. This was a wedding. A young bride would remember this night for the rest of her life. It wasn't fair for a few thugs to ruin it. 10 minutes later, I saw Marcy's boyfriend get out of his chair. I stood up and excused myself from the table. Carla gave me a strange look but seemed to understand. I casually walked to the side fire exit where people went for a smoke. The boyfriend gestured, and the other 2 guys followed him. They didn't see the 3 guys coming up behind them, with the Louisville Sluggers kept behind the bar. 6 guys were smoking outside the fire exit. When I told them to leave, they didn't argue. I walked about 20 paces from the door, stopped, and turned. The guys came out smiling, but not for long. A few seconds later, they heard the door close behind them. The smiles vanished when they saw 3 guys with bats and the father of the bride. It was over in 30 seconds. I never raised a hand. I'm sorry for any inconvenience caused on this special night. I felt like a character from The Godfather. Thank you for taking it outside, he said, shaking my hand before returning to his daughter. I thanked Sal's guys for their help and went inside to look for Carla. They stayed to clean up. It was time to leave. Carla was nowhere to be found, and Marcy's table was empty. Rick and a few of his friends had caught wind of the commotion and found me at the bar getting a drink. Dad, what's going on? I wanted to bite my tongue, but it didn't work. Your mother was here with her new boyfriend. That's all I need to know, Rick said with a smile, turning to the bartender to ask for a beer. We sat and talked about other things for about an hour. Carla finally showed up, looking a little worn out. Where have you been? I asked. She gave me a wicked little smile. Gina and I had to take your ex-wife to the hospital. She wasn't feeling too well. Rick and I couldn't stop laughing. Tony, can we go home now? It had been a long night, but a lot of fun. We never saw Marcy again. Carla and I are still together in the old neighborhood. Life is great.